Oh, we're live.
No, I'm not home.
We're live just as Greg answers his phone. So we're like super stoked today to have our good friends in After Hours Radio on the podcast.
Yes, and our first live stream that is working.
Hopefully working. Seems to be working right now, but we'll check it periodically as we go through.
Yes. Yeah, so would you guys like to introduce yourselves and introduce the band that you guys play in?
Yeah, I'm Nate. I play guitar and I sing in After Hours Radio.
And I'm Greg. I play bass guitar, also in After Hours Radio.
Tell us a little bit about the genre if people want to go check out After Hours Radio. What music would they be listening to?
It's a very good question. Honestly speaking, sometimes we have no difficulty accurately describing the music.
Alt rock is the easiest way. It's a big umbrella, but alt rock, a lot of 90s influences. We like kind of funky, groovy bass lines, so that kind of works its way in there a lot, and we pull from all kinds of different genres and try to mix it together.
Yeah, groove is definitely something that I think of when I hear your guys' tunes. It's definitely like a...
We don't like to put bass and drums too far back in the mix. We're not one of those alt rock bands. They deserve some prominence, so.
Sweet. So, one of the big reasons I thought it would be sweet to have you guys on right now is because you're about to leave on tour. So, you want to tell me a little bit about where you're going, where people can find you, and how you plan the tour and stuff?
Yeah. So this is our
a lot of
first
questions
tour,
at once.
Yeah.
We're pretty excited about. It's gonna be a very cool experience doing this for the first time. Playing a bunch of shows out of town back to back. We're hitting a couple spots in Ohio, Indiana, Nashville, Crofton, Maryland, Chicago. Is there anything I'm missing there?
It's pretty much just it. Mostly places around the immediate southeast Michigan area.
You might want to get a little closer to your mic.
Apologies.
Oh, you're fine.
But yeah, mostly just Midwest states with a few, one like in the South, one in the East Coast, just some kind of random ones out there. But yeah, this is our first tour. We just tried to book as many places as we could, and I think we came out all right.
Yeah, so how many dates overall is the tour?
The tour is going to be 10 days total, but we're kind of dividing it up into 2 legs. So there's going to be a first leg that's about 6 dates, and that starts this Thursday in Ann Arbor at Club Above. And then we have a little break after that. I have to actually be at a wedding, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And originally we were trying to schedule dates close to where the wedding is, which is in New York. It's kind of how we came across the Crofton, Maryland date. But yeah, it didn't exactly work out, so we just decided, we'll just divide it into the tour into 2 legs and just take a little break in between.
I feel like in a way that's almost better because you get to feel it out, see on the first leg how it goes and like what you can improve for the next leg.
That was kind of the idea behind this one. It was like, do what we can, kind of get a feel for what it's like to book this, what kind of work is involved in doing something of this nature, especially when you're doing it all yourself. What like are good strategies to book it, what's not, and also just kind of what it feels like to be playing a show 5 days in a row.
Yeah.
Driving between each one and trying to find places to stay and all that stuff on your own. It's kind of a lot to keep track of. So kind of come out of it getting a feel for what it takes so we know what we're doing next time a lot better.
Yeah. The logistical process is a lot, especially if you're a band that's like booking your tours all on your own. It's like a lot to take care of, especially, if you're a band, you like also like want to play music and like be working on your music, and it's kind of separate. Yeah. How do you guys balance that?
I don't know. For us, it's kind of a toss up. This month has been a very unique month because I finished school and I got a month off before I start my next job. Greg had some time off for starting up work again, and like a lot of the band members had some free time this month, so we've kind of spent almost every day either booking, trying to find bands, playing our sets, that kind of stuff, or writing music. and it's kind of been, if we can get the whole band together, then we'll do songwriting stuff, and then if not, then work on our own to try to, make sure the tour is progressing the way it should be. And I don't know, some of it's been coming together kind of last minute. Like, we're just now finishing up some of the book, like the lineups for some of the shows that we had to book all the bands ourselves. We got the venue, and then we had to find all the local groups to fill in the rest of the lineup.
I definitely think we found that is the hardest part. Also, I'm currently confused because I'm only seeing a lot of audio coming on my mic and not on your guys' mic, which is not awesome. So, I don't really know what's going on with that, or whether we should...
If I get closer,
none.
Oh, there we go. So if I get real close, no,
I think it's mine.
Test. Oh yeah, it's very, very, very low.
For some reason, it's all me.
Hopefully you guys have been able to hear us, but
It seems that mine might be the most on for some reason.
Are you getting anything from them?
I don't see much.
It looks very minuscule.
Looks like you're getting it from this mic. All right. Well, trial and error, as all things.
Hello.
that's solid.
Oh, okay, we're getting 1 and 2. All right, I guess let's do a share and a share.
3 and 4. You're 1 and that's 2.
Interesting.
Preamps that we can turn up.
It's like this. It's like my left to right.
Huh.
This way.
Well, let's just give them this mic to share for now, and we'll share that one. Yeah? All right, here's a mic. So.
Can you hear us now? Yeah, looks pretty good. Oh, there we go.
Shuffle around. Just go. All right, we're all gonna be on the couch.
Sweet.
So anyway, arranging all the dates close together enough that you could go from place to place was one of the major challenges. Like one band would answer from one town, then they would not be able to do that one date, but they want to do another date. How did you guys figure that out? How did you navigate it? Was it was it like you just kind of put those other dates on hold and said we'll come back another time and do it with you, or try to convince them?
In our case, it was like a lot of shuffling, as you planned it. Like, we had one big picture, and then it all got scrambled. I don't know if that was for you guys.
Something similar. It started as this set of dates, and we had it all pretty organized and planned out. This is the logical next step from where we were going from, trying to keep things down to a 2 to 3 hour drive between different shows, so it wasn't this arduous process of driving along with setting up and all that other kind of stuff before, as we're going through the tour. And then over time, we were able to book some areas, some places we didn't get any responses at all, because it kind of, for us at least, it turned out being, for every show that we booked, we kind of booked our shows first and then went and tried to, for the ones that we had to set up the lineup, we kind of figured that would be the easier thing. After doing it, maybe it wasn't. It didn't work out that way, but that was the initial thought. And so we kind of booked all the locations that we could first and then went into lineups afterwards. But based on some of the things we could book for certain days and some not, and they'd be like, oh, well, we can't give you a show for Monday, we can give you a show for Tuesday. And if that kind of fit and we didn't have anything during that date, we would do it and then try to slightly adjust our tour schedule around that as best we could. I don't know. That's mostly how it ended up mapping out. And then if we couldn't get something for sure, we kind of put that as just a day off in some cases, depending on how it mapped out. Because from other people that we've known have done this, they said that having those days off after 3 or 4 in a row is a very worthwhile thing to do. You don't want to be playing every single day. At least that's what we've been told.
Did you guys have end goals for certain cities that you're we have to hit? We definitely want to hit Chicago, or was it kind of just these seem like cool places?
Yeah, we had a few locations like that. Originally, somewhere near New York City was one of them. That's one of the ones that didn't work out, unfortunately. But we knew we wanted to start in Ann Arbor because we actually happened to already have a gig booked in Ann Arbor around this time. So we're oh, there you go. First show of the tour. And then Yeah, we have some. We're partly based in Chicago as well, so we thought Chicago would be a cool place to kind of end things off. So that'll be the last day of our tour on June 11th.
Yeah, so that's kind of an interesting or a unique kind of aspect of you guys is that you kind of are part of both the Ann Arbor, Southeast Michigan scene and the Chicago scene. That like probably gives you better access to like a variety of possibilities in terms of what you can do for live concerts and getting draws and stuff. But it also probably makes maybe your scheduling a little difficult. I don't know. Like, what's your experience being part of both of those scenes at the same time? Kind of like living in separate cities, but also being part of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly certain things we had to figure out. There's some complications involved, but honestly, we've been doing it for a while now. And it's kind of just what we're like used to. We generally just meet on weekends, mostly for gigs. Sometimes like songwriting sessions. We also share a lot of song ideas, like sonically. So we use like a field recorder for a lot of our practices, and kind of use that to keep like song ideas going. But in terms of the access of both these kind of scenes, it is pretty nice in that we can try more areas. And I mean, we do have a stronger base in the Ann Arbor, Southeast Michigan scene right now, but we have a sizable, little following in Chicago that we can count on for most shows. So that's kind of nice to have that.
So we started we were all in Ann Arbor to start out with when we first formed, and then we kind of had to slowly adjust because Greg moved out to Chicago for better job opportunities and that kind of thing, and we found out there's a huge DIY scene there, much stronger than here in Ann Arbor. And we've kind of had to slowly adapt our songwriting process, but it's also given us a ton of access to new DIY venues. Like when we started this tour process, we kind of had an Excel sheet full of different cities and different venues that we knew of in these areas, and the Chicago list was enormous compared to everything else. So that made booking that show much easier just because we already had a database of places to contact.
Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about the difference between I think one interesting thing when jockeying and touring bands is the difference between different scenes, because that is just a huge element of how you book shows and whether you can get an audience even at all. Like some towns just don't have an audience for your music really. So I wanted to ask you guys about the differences between here in Chicago in your eyes, because I've experienced I think that there's a lot more unity to the DIY Chicago scene. I think it's like they have those town hall meetings. So what are your guys' experiences with the differences in scenes?
I can mention what I've seen. Greg is living in Chicago, has become more of an active member of the scene. He's actually going to have a DIY house in the next couple months. He's getting a house with a couple other musicians there, so we'll talk more about it. But based on what I've seen from Ann Arbor versus Chicago, there's a handful of co-op houses here, and there's places that will hold concerts and shows for groups that aren't able to sell out large bars and things of that nature, where it's kind of their only draw is for the local band, versus there's some places that I think are better for exposure for groups that don't already have tons of recognition already. And in the Chicago scene, there is a number of places we played where it seemed like there was young people coming out, and they didn't even necessarily have to know the bands they were going to see. They just kind of knew what to expect from the house. They knew the environment. They knew the people there, and they were excited to come check out new music and just kind of see what was out there. Which is kind of a refreshing
felt like houses had followings. Like a place had a following more than...
Right, but you can cultivate a space with that just built-in culture. Sorry.
In Ann Arbor, there's bits and pieces of that, but also I feel like sometimes you'll play a show and there'll be a ton of people there, but it seems like people are more there for the party, which is cool. That's still fun. But depending on what your goal is for the show, and when you're trying to meet, reach people and find people that are interested in what you're doing, it's not the same experience.
Yeah, I've definitely played a few places in Ann Arbor where there'll be a couple hundred people there, but only maybe a quarter of them are actually watching the show, and then like we won't get paid. Yeah, so I mean every place is different, but yeah.
Do you want to talk about the venue you're gonna start in Chicago and like some of the venues that you guys have played at there?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I basically have, I kind of helped organize this DIY collective in the kind of past months. And it's basically just a bunch of friends getting together, and we were all kind of interested in doing this sort of thing, which is starting a DIY space in Chicago. And there's already many of them. Some of the ones that we've played at include the Dollhouse DIY, which is well known as a feminist venue space, and they're very active with social justice and stuff like that. And then we've also played at this place called the Dojo, and that was our last DIY gig in Chicago, and it was really a blast. It kind of to me it reminded me of some of our shows that we've had in Ann Arbor at like Luther House, where Nate lives, which is a co-op student cooperative like we're at right now in Vail. And but the difference was like the crowds were around the same size. But the kind of difference was at Dojo is that in Chicago, the whole audience seemed just very captivated in listening to the music. It was a little odd at first because I didn't see as many people like moving their bodies as much. That's kind of what I've seen more often at our shows at like Luther, for example. And like as Nate was saying, a lot of people treat it kind of as like a dance party with live music, which is really cool to do. I recommend anyone to play shows like that. But yeah, it was definitely interesting seeing the difference at the Dojo where we had a big crowd, similarly big crowd, but like they seemed just really there for the music specifically. It wasn't so much of a party; it was more of like an actual show. And anyway, that's just what I'm hoping to develop. We'll be looking for properties to rent. We're currently looking for properties to rent, but Chicago has this thing where most rental properties on the market don't last more than a few weeks. So we won't have the definite location until a little bit closer to that. But yeah, I'm excited in the meantime.
Sweet. Yeah. Have you been to any of the town hall meetings ever before? Have you attended them?
Yeah, I have actually.
What are some of the things they talk about there? Because I think that's one thing that from the tours we've gone on seems unique to Chicago. This DIY scene that's unified. I feel like it's a little bit necessary just because of the size of the city, but it's really cool. So yeah, what do they talk about at them?
Yeah, well, it's actually a somewhat new thing, and it kind of arose from this this Facebook group. It kind of arose from this Facebook group called DIY Chicago, and it's one of the most impressive DIY music scene groups on Facebook I found. It has like thousands of members. Sometimes that means that things get a little out of control. There's definitely plenty of trolls that take advantage of that situation. But there's also some good things out of it. But yeah, basically some people were kind of getting a little fed up with that kind of stuff happening, and they also just wanted to kind of centralize the organization more, because like DIY Chicago, the group is so broad, there's thousands of people, so they wanted to try bringing everything into a central location. And really a lot of what they talked about was just a variety of topics. Basically someone would just nominate a topic and they would add it to a list. Each of the meetings take place at different DIY spots that choose to host that night, and they generally have someone who's just like note-taking, so that's a really cool aspect of it. So they're constantly keeping track of topics. Like,
so what were some of the topics?
Yeah, good question. This one interesting one I think is ongoing is moshing etiquette. So if someone wanted to bring up the issue of moshers who are not who don't have a lot of etiquette, I guess, kind of trying to draw the line of like what you should and shouldn't do in that situation. So that was kind of an interesting one.
Necessary one in my opinion. I think that's kind of a necessary one, because especially in a lot of house shows, if you get a heavier band, like moshing is fun. I like moshing, but when you've got 8 people in a large room and you start trying to mosh around, you've got a lot more space to get a running start. There's a lot of people that probably aren't expecting it. Some people are into it and some people aren't. So you got 3 people that are into moshing, and the other 5 people there are not, then you just kind of end up running around full speed and like running into someone, knock them into the wall, and like the intentions I think are all good, but it doesn't always turn out with good results.
Yeah, it's difficult because you want to like encourage everybody to like do whatever they want to do to like enjoy a rock show, but at the same time like you don't want their whatever they're doing or their activities to like be invasive on other people, and that's the fine line. I know we were kind of talking about moshing last week a little bit.
Yeah.
Like definitely had some fun times in mosh pits, and then I've also like gotten hurt a little bit too.
Our Settlers of Catan house set got stepped on in a mosh pit, and it's fine. We got all the pieces, but that made me a little sad.
Speaking of that, at this same house, I was at a show at Vale a little while ago, and Arson Party, the local metal prog band, was playing, and at some point my car keys got on the floor, and then when I found them after the set, all the gadgetry like buttons and stuff for the car alarm was just gone, just completely gone. It's just like a hollow key now, but it still works. But yeah, moshing can definitely kind of get out of control. I wanted to mention also one thing that kind of comes up, like a similar common thread in the DIY meetings at Chicago, is kind of like social justice and politics and stuff like that, which is kind of interesting. I've seen people post on the Facebook group DIY Chicago before, like asking or bringing up these kind of political topics, and definitely some people kind of backlash sometimes, and they kind of say like, hey, this is like music, what are you doing with this here? But I see a lot of the people bringing it up saying that at least with DIY shows, they're just kind of intrinsically connected with like leftist politics, and that's a question I've kind of wondered before. I don't necessarily have an answer to it, but I thought it was kind of interesting, and it's a common thread, I would say, that kind of pops up in the meetings and the Facebook group DIY Chicago.
Oh man, we both like have ideas here.
Go.
You should talk first.
Okay. Well, I was just gonna say, I think even in Ann Arbor that comes up to some degree, but I think since I've played now at the Dollhouse a few times, especially there, they definitely make an effort to put a kind of highlight on different. First of all, just like female artists is one of their big, and they were doing a drive for the homeless for tampons and stuff like that when I was there last, and I think that's really cool. But it does start to tread a line when you're starting to make statements about, I guess, if people don't agree with you, can they not come to your show? Stuff like that. I was thinking the times that it's come up in Ann Arbor is we've had, I think that there's this fine line of what do you allow at your show of people, and I think that that's what's really cool that Chicago townhouse meetings seem to really address. Do we allow people that, is it stopping their free speech, or are you saying like, no, I don't want people that are saying aggressive things, homophobic things in my house. This is my house, so I have control over that. We had a metal show here a few months ago that everyone was amazing at, except for this one band that their singer was being like really aggressive and really homophobic on stage, and we didn't really know what to do. And I feel like it's really interesting that they kind of bring those topics up in the Chicago scene. Do they have a process of what, like, is there a standard of how to react to those kind of situations, or?
Yeah, that's one of the other topics that has been kind of ongoing, like I mentioned before, among the other topics I mentioned. But yeah, basically, people are trying to find a kind of standard for DIY spaces to follow in regards to that. And there's been some suggestions that most people seem to be okay with. Like there's this organization called, the acronym is FASN. I think it's Female Action Support Network. And it's basically just this kind of organization. They have like liaisons that go to shows to make sure, like, if stuff like that's going on, they have someone to address it. And the idea is to hopefully have one of those liaisons or someone who's trained and willing to do something like that at every DIY show. So it's very organized in that sense. And like I said, I mean, kind of the standards that have been suggested are just like no homophobia, no racism, stuff like that. That I think most people are pretty down with. At least someone that I would want to be in a show with.
Yeah.
I think in general, I mean, co-ops have this degree. I don't think it's as politically centered, but I mean, there's always situations where sometimes you have people at a party or at a show that aren't quite able to handle their alcohol, or sometimes they're just not, just kind of combative in nature. And if someone's creating a space that's not allowing other people to have fun, or like becoming aggressive towards people, I mean, in your own house, you have every right to get remove someone. And I think like DIY shows, it's always in someone's house. So, I mean, even politics aside, if someone is being disruptive or aggressive towards you or your friends or whatever, I mean, at some point you try to be diplomatic about it, but you know, it's your show that you're throwing, so I think you have every right to get rid of them. But there's aggressive and non-aggressive ways to do that as well. But
yeah, so you're talking about how they were kind of, DIY scene was kind of trying to kind of maybe create like a standardized culture for that sort of a thing, or like some guidelines to work through it. Do you feel that there's kind of an attempt to kind of standardize other things in general, or do you think it's more just kind of in this area of just like trying to navigate the kind of difficult realities of having a venue?
So I would say there's multiple difficult realities with running a DIY venue. That's definitely a very big one, these kind of issues. But one that they also are trying to address is like a PA swap or PA share. I think that's what it's called. So it's essentially something that's owned by the community, I guess. I mean, it'll be stored in a central location, but it's basically PA setups that anyone can rent, and they can also have someone trained to help them run it. So it's basically giving anyone the opportunity, if they have access to a physical space, to put on a DIY show, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, having access to sound equipment was something that, like, when I was in high school, like in a smaller town, that was like so difficult because, you know, we were just like, you know, high school band starting up, and we didn't like own our own PA, and so like trying to like get, yeah, it was really difficult. It was really cool that that's something that the community is working on, like having public access to. Super awesome.
Yeah, I think it's definitely like it's addressing kind of a challenge that some spaces have, because even if they do have a PA setup, it might not be very good or suitable for a space that has, you know, not very good acoustics or something like that. So I think it's, I really like how the community is kind of tackling these types of issues in Chicago. And yeah, I've kind of noticed that it doesn't exist as much in Ann Arbor or southeast of Michigan, but I would certainly be open to trying to facilitate some growth in that, because I think there is a lot of certainly potential for these kinds of things to happen in this area.
Yeah, there's definitely enough artists, I feel.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So you guys put out a single just a few weeks ago on what was it, April 20th?
Yeah.
You guys want to like talk about what the process for that was? Like, I don't know how you wrote it, how the recording was, if you're working on other stuff, release wise. Yeah, that's kind of broad, but
the songwriting process in general was always ongoing. I mean, I think all of us in After Hours Radio kind of play our instruments with our own free time when we can, and it's just something we like doing. So there's always stuff that's kind of being come up with, different ideas, phrases, riffs, different stuff. And so that song that we put out was that we've been playing it live for a couple months, I think, before April 20th when we released it. And that was kind of started off a bass riff that Greg wrote, or a couple of them, and then I worked with him with Greg a little bit on it, wrote some different parts, brought in the full band, and then as we continued to play it live, it slowly evolved. the actual recording of it kind of came about as almost a chance thing. We didn't plan in advance really. We wanted to release something, but we didn't plan specifically for the single. There's a guy in my house that is he's working towards a degree in the recording school here at U of M.
The PAT program?
Yep, the PAT program.
We are both products of that.
Represent.
It's a great school. And he needed a group to record for one of his projects, and so he contacted us about it. And so, for us, it was like free time in a really nice studio with good gear and stuff like that. So, of course, we said yes. And this was kind of the strongest new song that we had that wasn't released yet. So we decided to record this one. And got the main tracks down. Then we're friends with one of their housemates, Evan Cleoparagon, who plays an arson party here in Ann Arbor.
Great musician, great engineer, does all sorts of stuff. Yeah, great dude.
And then we worked with him for a little bit to kind of do some overdubs and kind of polish things up before getting that recording out. But comments on that?
Yeah, I guess one thing I just wanted to mention again is just like how a lot of our songwriting is just ongoing. So, as Nate mentioned, I kind of wrote the structure of the song just on bass. So basically a bass line, different parts. That came together, I think, in like winter of 2015, so like January 2015. So it's actually been really kind of developing over time. We also originally kind of wrote the song with a completely different lineup that we recorded with. We actually had like a kind of an in-session drummer just for this one recording because we didn't have a permanent drummer at the time. And there's our friend Adam Hastings and the Elephant Selbies, who are based in Kalamazoo.
Awesome. Do you have sorry, yeah, I was just losing my voice. I'm sick, as you can, I'm sure, tell. So I was like, okay. Anyway, another thing is that you live at Luther, and you guys throw a bunch of shows there, and you used to live in Knock, where there's a bunch of shows. Is Luther Fest happening this summer?
Yep, Luther Fest is happening this summer.
Are the plans? Do you have a date already? I know that you last year were aiming to get bigger touring bands, which was really cool. So do you want to talk about who you're looking at this year, who you had last year?
So Lutherfest this year is going to be July 29th and July 30th. We kind of scheduled it a little later than usual with hopes of trying to get some bigger acts, because a lot of touring groups are scheduling 2-3 months out for all of their shows. And so last summer we had the Cardboard Swords, Sinai Vessel, Running Shoes, the Fever Haze. Were some of them. We had a couple others that were from like the New York area that Jack booked. Lutherfest has kind of been an evolution. There's always a couple curators, and we kind of keep in the loop this year. Jack Rosette used to live at my house, and he runs a late night radio show on WCBN, Jam with Jack Straw. Very much into jam bands. Is actually involved with a group called Stormy Cromer based here in Ann Arbor, Nipsey. And so he's been pretty actively involved in stuff. He's booked some touring bands for previous Lutherfests. There's a guy named Tully that lived in the house before I ever even lived at Luther, that booked a lot of bands as well. So this year we're trying to kind of get everyone together and book as many of the bands that like we listen to that are kind of growing, and not just local groups. Of course, always we're gonna book the local groups because that's half the fun of Lutherfest. But also try to get some bigger groups that we all kind of listen to on our iPods and stuff like that on a daily basis. And
do you want to give any hints of any bigger groups that you're looking at? Or
so
too soon.
It's still a work in progress. The booking of this tour has definitely kind of interfered with my ability to kind of give that the amount of attention that I want to at the moment. But when we get back, I'll be working on booking that full time. But I'm very excited for the Fever Haze to be joining us. They are based in Michigan. I believe Howell. I could be wrong on that. Don't quote me on that. But they've been doing a lot of local Midwestern tours, and kind of surprised they're not signed yet. But they're a very good group that I like. Whenever I can see them in like East Lansing or anywhere nearby, I go out because they're just a great group. Highly recommend them. So I'm excited for them. But we're working on more. We've been trying to, any larger groups that are helping us with this tour, trying to give them spots because good people and good music. So that's been a good opportunity to try to reach out to people that are outside of the state and bring more good kind of lower, like music with lower exposure to Luther Fest from different areas. So.
Yeah, I guess one of the big purposes of like this podcast is we just kind of want to like try to give like whatever amount of exposure as possible to like bands that maybe should be getting it or deserve it, but like there's just so many bands out there. There's so many scenes. I guess what bands are you guys like stoked on right now? Who's influencing you? That's kind of vague again, but yeah.
That's kind of a tough one, especially for our band, because I think we all have some common music interests, of course, otherwise it wouldn't work, but it really kind of diverges a lot. I think a lot of the common bands that we listen to as a group, it's like stuff that we listened to a couple years ago, and then our music tastes have sort of started to branch out, which is, I think, honestly, a good thing for our overall sound, because you got to get a mixture of all these different stuff. But like a lot of the bands that I have listened to mostly for the past 3 years are probably stuff that Greg has very little interest in, and somewhat vice versa. So that's a tough one for me to answer.
What are you top favorite right now? Like, who did you listen to earlier today or yesterday?
I think
Or if you don't have a new
favorites hard. I've been listening a lot to Knuckle Puck recently, a lot of the Fever Haze. But Knuckle Puck's like not really close to our genre at all.
Did you know Knuckle Puck? Or did you know Knuckle something else?
They're a pop punk band from
Knuckle Fuss, different band.
Great jam band.
Knuckle Puck is a pop punk band based out of Chicago. That's kind of been blowing up recently, but just did their first headlining tour, which I went to go see, which was really cool. But what have you been listening to recently, Greg?
Well, earlier today I was listening to Little Mac DeMarco.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was just listening. I think for the first time, he has that instrumental record, like some other ones.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard that one before, and I was just listening to it, and it was just like so cool to just chill and vibe to.
Yeah, I really dig that one. I hope I was hoping that he was going to turn those into full songs, because some of them are pretty catchy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like as Nate was saying, we have pretty diverse tastes. A lot of stuff I listened to, which kind of influenced this new song, Systemic, includes kind of like funk and reggae. Like I used to DJ at WCBN FM in Ann Arbor, and they're all about like a free form format there, and I just kind of developed a habit of making playlists, and I like to listen to playlists with all kinds of different music from around the world and stuff like that. And I tend to think that has kind of an impact on the songs in a kind of a groovy sort of way, as we've kind of mentioned.
WCBN's like a wonderful, glorious rabbit hole. I mean, if I understand that if you're working there, they're encouraging you to pick out music that you have no idea what it's going to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. You sounded like you.
I'm on a totally different topic. I don't know why this made me think of this, but
Fun watching the mic wars. Everyone's got a different idea.
Yeah.
What someone says, like, oh no, give it to me.
yeah, that's why we try to do everyone with a mic. But this is live stream or two mics, I guess, is what we're finding out right now. But anyway, I guess this is a changing topic, but I think it's interesting to hear.
Question.
Oh wait, did I can answer it? I thought you were just talking about WCBN. Did you have a question?
Oh, I thought there was a question. Maybe.
Well, whoever wants to respond, they can.
I don't know. Go
I've
ahead.
heard from Greg. There's definitely a policy there at WCBN where you think you mentioned this, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not, if you can avoid it, they don't want you to play any music twice in the entire time that you're running, like doing DJing there.
Yeah.
So they encouraged, they got a huge thing of different vinyl and records and stuff, and if you can avoid playing any song twice in the years you may be DJing there, that's what they want you to do. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Definitely it kind of forces you to expose yourself to new music on a regular basis.
Yeah, that's a cool approach to get people to just have to check out something new.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, well, at least while I was there, a lot of people didn't necessarily follow that.
Right. It's hard to.
Yeah. I mean, some people like having kind of specialty shows around certain genres or styles, like how Nate mentioned earlier, our friend Jack on Jamming with Jack Straw. It's kind of a jam band oriented one, but it still works really well with the freeform format because there's just like so many, like live. Like one time I heard him playing like a 10-minute like Bob Marley jam, and then followed up with some Grateful Dead or something. And I don't know. I personally don't necessarily listen to a lot of like jammy music, but he's definitely exposed me to a lot.
Yeah.
And like I've kind of learned how big some of these up and coming artists I've heard of, like Humphreys McGee or like String Cheese Incident or something like that. I mean, I'm not super familiar with the scene, but I've just been really impressed by how some of these bands are growing, and it's definitely kind of a modern like subculture, I think, like jam bands like that, kind of how we've had previous music subcultures, which I think is pretty interesting as a contemporary sort of thing.
Yeah, we had Pajamas, local jam band on the other week, and we were talking about how like that music just has this like really unique ability to like create a culture around it. It's sort of unique that it doesn't really necessarily happen in a lot of other genres, or at least not in that way.
It's the only genre I've ever seen where it's like almost every live act is almost like a recorded like thing that people will actively search out, like this date and this location, this particular version, because everyone's different when you're kind of everything's jam centric. You don't have everything scripted and written out. And that kind of like Jack would, when he was living at Luther, there was times where I'd see him. He had a subscription to every Humphreys show that was ever performed. They had recordings of it all, video. And he would tune in for every single one, and he would have his favorites from this year and then from the previous year. And that kind of thing doesn't exist with a lot of other genres, and I think that's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah. Well, so the one thing I notice a lot when I listen to your guys' music is like you guys have like a really like in tune communication with each other in terms of like what's going on. I feel like you guys are like really skilled at songwriting. Do you feel that like your exposure with whatever Jack's doing with jam bands is sort of like making its influence at all with your music, or is your goal more song based still, or is there a mix?
I think it has an influence to a degree. I know when we approach songwriting, it's like we're very intentional with we'll try to map out a structure and what kind of dynamics feel we want to have for every section, even before we necessarily have all of the parts written or vocals or anything like that. And we've been trying to get to the point where we can like we'll start some shows off with jams and stuff like that, because it's kind of a good way to check levels, and it's kind of a fun thing. And the better that a band can jam together, I think the better. And we've had a ton of different lineups through performing. Me and Greg are we've always been part of After Hours Radio, but we've kind of had all kinds of different drummers, and Summer drum with us for a little bit, which is really cool. But like the
Japan
better
took many of your members.
a surprising number. But
It's true.
the more that like a lineup is able to jam together solidly, I feel like the better our sets are when we have like more intentional crafted songs. And there'll be some elements of jamming in there, but being able to read each other really well is important.
Yeah, and actually, now that I think about it, After Hours Radio has definitely some history with jamming, at least. I mean, we now it's kind of like because of the distance and stuff, we try to make time for it when we might have kind of like restricted time or whatever. But before, when we kind of started out, we would be jamming at Nakamura Co-op a lot. And I guess you could say 2014. And a lot of the songs we rewrote on the first EP were kind of through jams. I mean, I would say like the song "Blind" is almost purely from a jam. Like we basically, like I mentioned before, we share ideas through recordings a lot. So we had like a field recording of just a jam session before, and we had no intention of writing a song, and we just like heard this just kind of very fluid structure. It was still pretty jammy, you know, and repetitive and groovy, but it still had this kind of structure, and we're just like, yeah, let's just, you know, try to figure it out. And it was definitely a lot harder transcribing that than it was just jamming out to it. But because we're just listening to a recording, we're trying to like remember like, oh, what was I doing at the time, you know, trying to recreate this. But yeah, that was pretty fun. And yeah, we definitely started out with our first lineup jamming a lot. We had this drummer who was very kind of based in like Latin jazz and jazz fusion, and just very, very technically talented. I'm a self-taught bassist. I do have classical training on cello, but bass is for me has just been kind of like purely by the ear at this point. So it's very interesting having that dynamic with different, I guess, chops you could say in a band. But this guy was just very technically talented, and just really love the aspect, I guess, of jazz, which is like improvisation. Just really love improv a lot, and that kind of gave a lot of our jams and eventual song ideas some spontaneity early on. Yeah.
You guys released the most recent single and your EP on Bandcamp. Did you put it on SoundCloud and Spotify, and how do you feel about streaming services and that type of releasing?
Our single is only on Bandcamp, I believe, right? Okay, I'm wrong.
Wrong.
Singles, it is on Bandcamp, but it's also available on SoundCloud and YouTube. The EP, we got this kind of deal when we ordered some CDs of it. They put it on iTunes, Spotify, and maybe I'm missing something, but basically they helped us get the EP on pretty much any medium you could think of, at least that was around at the time, streaming-wise. Yeah, which is pretty cool. So yeah, you can find our self-titled EP on any of those.
How do you feel do you feel like it's pretty necessary to have it out there? Do you feel like it's not until you pass a certain threshold of having fans? Or what do you get your music from there?
I don't personally. I know plenty of people that do. I don't mind that it exists. I think it's just another level of exposure, especially at our level. Like, I know there's a couple people in my house that didn't really buy their own music, and they listened to everything through Spotify. But because we had our stuff on there, they were able to listen to our songs on a regular basis. We're currently like not as money driven as we could be. We're more just trying to get exposure to as many people as possible. So from that perspective, a streaming service isn't necessarily a detriment. Personally, if for all local bands, I'll buy music off Bandcamp, and I think that's the most direct way to support the music if I can't go see them at a live show and buy the CD. And because I know that it's a struggle as a smaller group artist, so I try to get my money to them directly as possible. But for our group, I think having those streaming services allows us to just get in front of more people, and it makes it easier for people to access. So from that perspective, it's a good thing. Although I encourage, if you really like something and you want that music to keep existing and you want it to be, buying that music directly on Bandcamp or in person really helps smaller musicians keep doing what they're doing, because it's not free. The equipment's expensive, and it's a very expensive thing to do, but we all enjoy it, so we keep doing it anyways.
Yeah, it's extremely expensive. Sometimes it's doesn't doesn't really come across. But yeah, it's really expensive just to make a record, and a lot of people are selling it for like less than a sandwich, would cost.
Try not to think about it.
So yeah, yeah, buying something like paying that less than a sandwich price is like the most direct way to support that. Yeah.
What about merch, you guys? What do you have planned for the tour? Is there new merch? Yeah. What do you guys have for merch or plan to have that you don't have yet?
Well, currently we have CD copies of our self-titled EP. And recently we got some stickers in the mail.
Nice.
Some custom design art by a good friend of ours, Jeffrey Williams.
Jeffrey Smith Willems. He also has a Facebook page. It just got started recently. It's called Jeffrey SW Artwork, and he, you should check him out. He's just a very, very cool visual artist, personal friend of mine, and it's kind of been involved. Yeah, really unique style, and he's been involved with our kind of the visual aspect of After Hours Radio, mostly from the beginning, which is we've been very fortunate to have.
Cool. Do you guys have plans to do shirts or like the problem with things like that, I know for us and for most small bands, it's like it seems necessary. It's a huge investment up front, and at the same time it feels necessary. But then it's this huge investment that is like a very long payoff to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the merch stuff kind of has like its own entrepreneurial side where you got to measure out like how much demand do you think there is, how much supply should you have. We have shirt designs that Jeff was nice enough to make for us like he just sent it to us. I don't think we asked for it, right? Which was awesome. Really cool design. I've always been of the opinion that I think like band shirts can be an advertisement, but it should be a cool piece of art on its own, even without the band name involved at all. And he did a really good job with that. Really cool piece of art on the front, and kind of little logo on the back. We are definitely planning to produce those at some point, but it's going to be a bit of an investment. And it's hard to predict what the demand would be, really. The main reason we don't have for this tour is we didn't get the design until like a week ago. So even if we went around and like bought it right away, I don't think we would have it for when we departed for our tour, unfortunately. But they will definitely be coming in the future, and they're really cool looking.
Sweet.
Oh, I just wanted to get back on the train of, like, we sort of got sidetracked a few minutes back about, I just wanted to give Greg an opportunity to talk about maybe the bands that he's stoked on or stuff that he's being influenced by currently. Or if he just wants to shout out to, like, cool indie bands that don't have a ton of exposure. Now's your chance.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking earlier, like, how we... in the band, we don't have a ton of commonalities in music tastes necessarily, but we are grounded by some bands like Radiohead.
Not so indie, but
Yeah.
Yeah. Their latest album, I'm still kind of digesting it. When I take in music, I generally take kind of a while to digest it and really know how I feel about it. This one is definitely, for me, was like a grower. Like, I didn't know what to think of it the first time I listened to it.
Yeah, I heard a couple of the singles like numerous times by now, but I think I've only listened to the whole thing like a little less than twice all the way through.
Yeah, it's probably one of their deeper records. I've heard some people even say that they think it might be their last, just because there's a lot of themes of like separation and like ending things. I mean, kind of more explicitly, it seems to be about Tom York's girlfriend, like longtime girlfriend, leaving him.
Yeah, there's definitely a little bit of that.
Yeah, some people think it's symbolic to the end of Radiohead. We'll see, but yeah, Radiohead's been a big part of my life for several years now. And I think we have other band members that kind of have similar feelings.
share the Pixies.
Yeah, Pixies are another one. I mean, when we first started, we honestly kind of, in terms of live performances, our start was doing these open mics at Nakamura Co-op, and we did do a lot of kind of like hit song covers, like one from The Strokes, one from Radiohead. We did this one from Tame Impala called Half Full Glass of Wine, which was a lot of fun. Very hard to play, but a lot of fun.
Their music is complicated sometimes.
Yeah,
Is
sure.
it, so that Strokes tune that you did at open mic, is that the one that is still sometimes makes its way into your guys' sets even today?
That is correct. Yeah, it's called Someday. We've dropped a lot of covers, but that's gonna remain pretty consistent. Yeah.
Greg's been voting to remove it. I like it still, but we'll see. It's a fun song to play. So
We do have some new covers that we'd like to introduce. Possibly, I think we actually have played them both before, but they were kind of like one-off things, which we've had some enjoyment with that before. Like we had a show in January of this year, which was shortly after David Bowie's death. So I guess you could say that's someone who influences me a lot, is David Bowie. Like just his all kinds of discography. I really find him to be a really just inspiring songwriter. Like just to create exciting yet short but even concise songs, which I really like. Just like a really strong format that gets your point straight across. But yeah, we did a cover of Bowie that show in January, but it was kind of like a one-off thing. Nate's not particularly keen with Bowie, which is why I was happy that we were able to do that.
he's growing on me. The other cover that we're trying to get in the lineup real soon that we played once before, Oslo in the Summertime, of Montreal.
Of Montreal.
So that's
Great
a fun
band.
one. So that's going to be making its way into our set list in the very near future.
Yeah, so I guess in general, you guys feel pretty good about having covers in your live set. It's not like we've kind of experienced a variety of philosophies from different bands on, how they feel about adding covers. I know that for us, like, we don't want to, I guess us personally, we don't want to like overdo it, but we also feel that like covers are a great way to like, share the music that we like that might not necessarily be like in the style that we typically play or that typically comes from like, our writing process, but we want to like, like give that and share that with people. I don't know, where are you guys coming from?
Yeah, very much from the same place. I mean, Oslo in the Summertime by Of Montreal is actually a song picked out by our first singer, Callum Galt, who got taken away by Japan. Yeah, Callum. So when we started, I was in my senior year at University of Michigan. Callum was as well, and Callum got an opportunity through the JET program in Japan, which is a government-sponsored program that basically allows him to help work with their kind of efforts to expose kind of different parts of the country to foreign culture and stuff like that. So anyway, that's just a little fun fact of why we don't have that singer anymore. But he was really, I mean, he still is, I imagine, very into Of Montreal. He's seen Of Montreal many occasions. I saw them with him once, and I wasn't with him at the time, but he waited outside of Kevin Barnes, the singer's trailer, until he came and met the guy in person. Which is pretty cool. But anyway, Callum was a very big fan of Montreal, so we wanted to cover that. And yeah, obviously I'm a fan of the Strokes. I like Someday. No offense to Someday. Just played it a lot. And we covered Radiohead at one of our first open mics, and that was a commonality actually between like Callum, our singer, and Nate and I at the time.
I want to get some stuff on the record. We should go around and everybody should give their favorite Radiohead record, if you'd be so inclined.
I'm bad at this because I still haven't done the go through all of Radiohead. I have a weird relationship with Radiohead. I started with Pablo Honey and I didn't like it that much, and then I was like, I don't get why everyone likes Radiohead that much. And then I listened to Atoms for Peace, which is like kind of the off project, and I was obsessed with that album. And then recently started listening, like within the last few years, started listening to all of the more famous Radiohead hits and Radiohead hits, and realized that I already knew most of them too, obviously. But then I haven't done the like whole dive in album by album, but I was planning on doing that now since new record has come out.
So have you heard the new record yet, Moonshaped Pool?
For only the single. I've heard the Black Witch, Burn the Witch. Yeah, but you guys go ahead, do your favorite.
It's kind of changed over time. I think currently it's like Hail to the Thief or Amnesiac. But I had a kind of running gag with my first roommate when I started college, where he would just like randomly, spontaneously play any Radiohead song, and within the first 10 seconds, I should be able to tell him what the song, like the title of the song was. He never got me. I got them all. I got every single one of them. But yeah, I listened to way too much Radiohead in high school. But yeah, currently those two.
I think my favorite record is In Rainbows, which is not a very original choice, but I happen to kind of get more exposed into them. Not when that album came out necessarily, but like that was just the first one I listened to, and it was their most recent at the time. And that kind of led me, I think my next one was OK Computer, which my friend has told me that some people theorize there's a connection between OK Computer and In Rainbows in a mythological album sort of way.
I've read some conspiracy theories on it, never like tested any of the claims myself.
Yeah, me neither. But yeah, and then after that I just kind of went through the rest of the discography, which I now have, and yeah, it all started with In Rainbows for me, so that's what I would say is my favorite.
I guess my dive into Radiohead started when my sister, thanks Becky, she bought me the live album I Might Be Wrong for one of my birthdays, and that kind of got me into it. But
that's a good one. Yeah.
But I think my favorite is OK Computer, because I just have a weakness for like rock sounds, and that's like kind of the peak of the rock era Radiohead. But obviously all the records since then have been varying levels of brilliant. I definitely like the electronic sounds that they've kind of gone through. So yeah, they all have a good spot for me. I think OK Computer is my favorite.
Do you mind if I work backwards to like our opinion on the place of covers in sets and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Because I had a couple of comments on that. I think like having one or two, and it all depends on the length of the set that you're planning to play. It's kind of a good thing, especially if you're playing to a bunch of people that don't know your music already. It's kind of a good way to make people feel comfortable. It's like, oh, I know these lyrics and that kind of deal. And so for that reason, I think it's very useful to have like one or two thrown in there. And it's also a lot of fun because you can still take a cover and make it into an original of sorts. If I think we kind of always try when we're going to play a cover to. Sometimes we'll play it pretty close to the original, but a lot of times we like to try to make some variations if possible, and especially if it uses some instruments that we don't currently have in our lineup and stuff like that, because it gives you a cool opportunity to give melodies and lyrics that everyone in the crowd will have been exposed to before, but kind of give a new twist on it that hopefully people appreciate, and it makes it more fun for you to play it because you can kind of work out your own parts and add some originality to it, so it still sort of feels like an original of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was thinking of when Nate was describing that is this one time we covered Rock Lobster by the B-52s, and that was kind of a one-off cover, although we are currently looking to possibly bring that up again. But
Greg's always looking. It's a lot of Rock Lobster.
But yeah, I mean, at the time we didn't even have all the instruments that were originally used to record that record, like principally keyboard and backing vocalists. So kind of turned into a bit of a punkier version, I guess, but kind of surf rocky as well. That's actually, I mean, that's online. We kind of have it hidden because it's not super well quality, but if anyone is curious, they can always ask us to send them the link. Yeah.
Cool. I'm going to digress for 1 second just because you were mentioning open mics a while ago about just how that was your first place to perform. And I want to first just plug that we're having open mics on every other Thursday at Vale House starting this Thursday. And just talk about like how open mics kind of cultivate this free culture of trying stuff out that you might not have before. I know several bands that have formed around open mics. So yeah, just how did the open mic kind of give you guys? Was it like gave you the courage to just give it a shot? Or at least gave you a thing to get everything together for, and then.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're definitely one of those bands that got formed around open mics. I mean, I'm not sure if we would be a band if the Nakamura open mics would be around. I mean, we had jammed before we ever did one of those. We're actually, no, I think the first time we ever, yeah, there's kind of an evolution that happened, but the first time Nate and I ever did really anything is that, so I was playing bass with my housemate Callum, who's our first singer I mentioned before, and we had someone from the house playing drums, but it was just kind of awkward just having bass, drums, and vocals, and I kind of met Nate kind of just out of the blue, and we kind of had common interests in terms of what we wanted to do with music, and just kind of went from there. And yeah, I think it was just really nice because, I mean, first of all, like, I guess we're just really big fans of music, but we also like playing music, so it was a really cool way to, like, I mean, I at the time I was just really into like figuring out how to recreate something, because when my whole experience with learning bass has just been a lot by ear and like covers and stuff, so that was kind of my foundation, and it was cool like doing that with a whole band and expressing like who I was into. And open mics are just a great outlet for that, because no one really judges you for doing covers.
The judge-free zone.
A lot of room for experimentation. I've seen a lot of really cool stuff. A lot of experimental stuff at open mics. Some of it lands, some of it flops, but like everyone's supportive the whole time, which is an awesome environment to be in. You know, you can have some experimental cover where some guy's playing trombone of a Beatles song while the guitarist is playing a completely different Green Day cover underneath it, and it might work. It may not, but it's all good either way. People like appreciate that you're giving it a shot and exposing them to it, so that's kind of a cool thing. But.
Yeah, I was just thinking about other local band that formed at past Summer Veil series was Platonic Boyfriends. They started as just a kind of mess around, let's make this open mic more into a rock show, and then they became a band. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I did not know that. No, yeah, I always found that open mic, just the expectation from the audience is a little bit different. Like at a show, they might be a little bit more inclined of like, okay, like whether or not they paid admission, they are kind of thinking like I am expecting a certain like level of quality, professionalism, or something that like. With open mic, it just feels a lot more inclusive and egalitarian, and you can like try something out that isn't fully formed and like maybe fail at it, and like people are still going to support you, and that's like, you know, like just gives you the confidence to like take risks. That I think is really important.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think I would recommend to anyone who's like considering to start some sort of band that they intend to perform with, like, honestly, I think open mics are just a great way for us to practice performing in front of people, because we didn't have any of that sort of judgment to worry about. And then I kind of recall like the first like real show that we played. That was after a bunch of open mics. I kind of like lost track, but we did at least like 10 open mics before our first show, and I think that made our first show like pretty good. Like, I mean, we did. I guess that wasn't necessarily. That was our first like really good show for me, I guess I would say. It was at Luther Co-op where Nate lives, and they had this intercooperative council music showcase, so just musicians who live within the ICC, and that was just like a really awesome show. Before that, we had a couple interesting shows. Like our very first show was performing at a Valentine's themed show at Woodruff's, I guess, which is no longer around. But that was really interesting in how it kind of forced us to learn a lot of covers. So that kind of goes back to that topic. And then we did a couple of like private parties, which were, one of them was a little awkward. One of them was all right. So I guess that's why at the time I kind of thought of the Luther ICC showcase as our first kind of like show. But yeah, point being that happened a long time after we started doing open mics. So got plenty of practice with performances.
You guys kind of hinted that maybe not every show is always like the most ideal environment. Where's like the craziest place that you guys have played, or like the weirdest environment for an after hours radio show that's happened?
You want to talk about one of the ones I mentioned?
Craziest place?
Physics club thing?
Yeah, so we've had some really awkward shows that I wouldn't say, like, we've played at some crazy kind of like cool spots. We've also played a couple house shows where it was like, they weren't really planned for, and it was kind of the last minute thing, like, hey, you guys sound cool, do you want to play at our party? And we're like, okay, sure, why not?
Everyone wants to hear about the crazy weird spots.
The good ones or the bad ones?
Oh, the bad
All of them.
ones too. The bad ones, the weird ones, yeah.
So in this one, we played in some person's living room to what was supposed to be a party, but they started us really early, like 8 o'clock or something. And there was like 3 people that I'm pretty sure were just the officers for this club or something. And just kind of staring at us, trying to seem really interested and like ignoring the fact that they expected there to be like 20 or 30 other people in the room at the time. And it was okay. Like, it was still fun. Like, we enjoyed it because we were there. Just like, it gave us an opportunity to turn our amps up really loud and just like play live, which is always a good time if no one's watching. But it was a bit strange.
Another strange show we had, I actually think was pretty positive, was kind of technically the first DIY show we ever did in Chicago. And it was kind of, it happened out of circumstance. So I was living in this, I guess what's been happening a lot in Chicago lately is gentrification of different parts of the city, such as like greater development, new, more expensive high-rises popping up.
Ann Arbor too.
Yeah, right.
But I guess it's not. It's not the same.
Yeah,
No.
to a different extent, or in like
Yeah, I mean, there definitely are some parallels. But yeah, like the neighborhood I was living in at the time, it was kind of in a transitional phase. There was some like nice like bars and stuff popping up, but we still lived in this really kind of older, lower income building. You know, it was just like, I was fresh out of college. I was living with college roommates. And at a certain point, the building was bought by a new owner, and they wanted to renovate the whole thing. And they were able to evict all the other residents except me and my roommates. So we kind of found ourselves in a situation where there was like an empty apartment above us, and kind of just put on a show in a spontaneous sort of way.
I've heard about this show.
Yeah.
A legendary, cool show.
Yeah, it was very, very unusual. I mean, a little nerve-wracking because of certain characteristics about it, which I think people can probably figure out in their head, certain like risks that are involved with putting on such a show in such a space. But it was weird, crazy, but a lot of fun. We had some people come out. It was on the 3rd floor of the building, so it turned out to be a little like too hot because we were also like trying to soundproof like windows with mattresses, which made it even hotter. So that kind of affected the crowd a little bit, but it was pretty wild and fun overall. So it's probably one of our crazier shows, a little less negative. I mean, I wouldn't say it was negative at all. It was just very unusual.
Yeah, it kind of came about maybe due to negative circumstances, but maybe the show
This is one of the
itself.
coolest shows in my opinion, just because we got to set up in like kind of an abandoned area that looked like it was partially under construction. And the heat, actually, I viewed as a plus. You hit that like perfect sweet spot of where you're kind of sweaty when you're playing, so your fingers slide down the guitar super easily, and you can hit all the notes without reduce your friction.
Yeah, it really introduced me to the whole aspect of, it was like one of the first shows that I've ever set up. So the first show that we were directly involved setting up was for our EP release, which we had on Hash Bash 2015. And we tried to just like align those two things together to hopefully get a bigger draw, because we'd never really hosted a show before or anything like that. And then, yeah, like later that summer is when we hosted this thing in Chicago. And, I'd never done that kind of thing in Chicago before, and learned a lot and got to know some local bands that I was contacting. One of them that did not play with us at that time, but later on played with us at the Dollhouse DIY is called the Holy Motors, which I could give a shout out to since you mentioned that earlier, Sam. Just mentioning like bands that are a little smaller and giving them kind of, if anyone's, but they were.
I don't think I know them. What kind of music do they play?
Like kind of garagey, kind of rock, a lot pretty fuzzy, lo-fi, but yeah, super fun, pretty heavy, kind of like old school garage rock. I don't know how else to sum it up. We had a funny instance recently. We were hosting a show at Luther last week, and we had a Nipsey band called Human Skull come out and play, and I was wearing the whole.
Joel, right?
I believe so.
Joel.
That was the first time we'd had them around, and they've apparently been involved in the Luther music scene for a while, but that was the first time I'd met them.
I'm pretty sure members of that played in Chit Chat.
Yeah, that's
I think so.
Yeah.
But I was wearing the Holy Motor show when we were setting up that, and a couple of members like, "Oh, I know those guys. They're awesome." So, because they've made their way to Detroit a handful of times.
That's
super
awesome.
cool people. So that was kind of a fun experience.
I love when you're wearing a DIY band shirt and random people say something about it. They've seen the band, they know the band. We just had the band Indian Opinion at my house a few weeks ago. They were actually the first people that we did up one of these podcasts with, and I was wearing their shirt a few days later, and some random person on the street was like, "I know that band. I saw them in Bowling Green," and I was like, "They were just here a few weeks ago." They were like, "Whoa." Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Makes it feel like a small world.
Yeah, it really is. I just want to say, side note, on the Holy Motors, since Nate mentioned them playing in Detroit, they're actually on a record label based in Detroit. Really cool, run by this really young dude. I think it's called. They're on this one record label called Greenway Records, but I don't think that's the right one. They're actually on 2 record labels, which is really cool that we got to play with them. If that other, I might look it up on my phone actually after I'm done talking. But yeah, it's this really cool record label in Detroit, and they just put out vinyl. But yeah, I just wanted to mention also, because you mentioned like T-shirts, another band that I like to shout out is Vague Waves from Chicago, which is kind of like a fuzz garage rock indie band, and I own one of their shirts. And it's a kind of a simpler design, but I just like how it looks, like some cool art, and yeah, like you said, it's always cool to support stuff like that.
Sweet. I think we should probably wrap this up pretty soon. Do you have a question, though?
No, I just wanted to bring it back around and say that you can catch After Hours Radio on the first leg of their tour at Club Above in Ann Arbor this Thursday. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And if you guys are listening from the Midwest, there's a good chance that After Hours is going to be in a city near you very soon.
Yeah, we'll be in Cincinnati, Nashville, Kewanna, Indiana, Crofton, Maryland, Chicago, Illinois. What? I'm missing a couple. What am I missing, Greg?
We're also playing in Columbus. That's the day after. Did you mention Columbus or?
Nope.
Okay.
Are you guys playing Tree Bar in Columbus?
Yeah, we are.
That's a real interesting place. There is a huge tree right in the middle of the floor where the bands play.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, someone, we contacted actually a local band in that scene. We contacted a bunch, but this one actually was pretty into our music. I guess, yeah, I'll give them a shout out. The original soundtrack from Columbus put the show together, or hooked us up with the show. So yeah, we're really excited for that. That'll be after Club Above on Friday. So Friday's show in Columbus should be pretty swell.
Awesome. That's really exciting. So what time does your Club Above show start?
I think it starts around
Thursday, right?
9 p.m. and it's
Right.
this Thursday.
I'm
the
asking
26th.
for myself because I would love to go, but we're also having open mic, so I'm gonna try to time it so I can get there in time.
Playing later in the night. I'm not sure.
Perfect. All right, we're starting open mic early, so I'll try to maybe get people from open mic to go there after.
Right on.
Awesome. Thank you guys for coming on, and go check out After Hours Radio.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.